From London, this is the Standard Podcast, and I'm Mark Blunden. Coming up on this show, what now for HS2's Central London link, and Labour reveals more about their economy plans. But first, Britain's gold rush has begun with our first victory of Paris 2024 as Ros Canter, Tom McEwen and Laura Collett triumphed in equestrian team eventing at the Château de Versailles. Tom Daley earlier won a remarkable fifth Olympic diving medal as he took silver alongside Noah Williams in the final of the men's synchronised 10-metre platform event. It came after Adam Peaty narrowly missed out on the top podium spot to retain his title by a cruel 0.02 seconds off in the men's 100 metres breaststroke, ultimately settling for joint silver. Kimberly Woods also took bronze in the women's individual kayak. For more on Monday's podium successes, we're joined by reporter Robert Dex, who's been covering developments. Rob, our first gold.
Yeah, I mean, at last, show jumping, team eventing, we took gold. And actually, at 11 o'clock this morning, I think we were 13th in the medal table. This one gold has pushed us up to 7th. So it shows just the effect as well as on the whole team and, you know, the nation watching, the effect that a gold getting that under your belt has on your general standing in the Olympics. Laura Collett and Tom McEwen with Ros Canter took gold. Now, the first two of those people took gold in 2020 at Tokyo, and Ros Canter's the world number one. So perhaps we shouldn't be surprised that they won. You know, these are people at the very, very top of their game, but it's still a brilliant win. And we can say that the first time in this Olympics, we are the best in the world at something, which is always a nice thing to be able to say.
And all this comes in the wake of the Charlotte Dujardin scandal.
I mean, talking about gold medals, no one is ever certain of anything, are they, in the Olympics? But, you know, everyone pretty much assumed that she would get a gold if she competed. Then obviously this video came out courtesy of a whistleblower showing her whipping a horse. She was provisionally suspended. She then pulled out of the games herself. So it would be fair to say that the equestrian team have gone in under a bit of a cloud, which makes actually this even more of a triumph, doesn't it? That they've been able to put all that to one side, just concentrate on what's in front of them and win gold.
Now to the pool. What can you tell us about the double silvers?
Everyone thought Adam Peaty last night was a good chance for gold, which he was, and there was thousands of seconds in it, wasn't it? He ended up joint silver. I suppose some people might have thought Tom Daley might pull it out of the bag again, silver beaten by the Chinese just this morning. So I think we're doing good. And I was just thinking this, I mean, you know, we've just had the Euros where, you know, we got to the final and got to the final of previous ones. And we're big watchers of the Lionesses and women's football in my house. And, you know, World Cup finals, winning the Euros. And we're sort of used to success. And people like Daley and Peaty who turn up, win a medal at every Games, you get used to it, don't you?
What other Olympic events are Team GB looking strong in?
There's always surprises, there's always chances. Someone always has the games of their life, someone always has a disaster. But it is safe to say, things we've not seen a lot of, cycling, right? Everyone knows how well we do at cycling. Dominated it for getting on for decades now. Emma Finucane in the track cycling sprint, everyone tips as a possible gold. And then there's rowing, modern pentathlon, apparently looks very good for us. Yeah, sailing. We often do really well in sailing, which is one of those sort of strangely sort of forgotten Olympic sports till we start winning it. So there's that. Two, I think we should mention, also actually, as well as the cycling, we have more swimming to come. So we probably haven't seen the last of Adam Peaty and that he will do relays. So there's hope in swimming as well. Sky Brown, our young skateboarder, heavily fancied to do well. I mean, that would be a brilliant story, wouldn't it? You know, one of our youngest ever gold medalists if she wins. Long way to go yet. And of course, we haven't actually really seen much athletics yet. I would say Keely Hodgkinson in the 800 metres is definitely one to watch.
With your arts correspondent hat on, what was your take on Friday's Paris opening ceremony compared to London 2012?
I was saying to someone, I watched it in my front room, and it was the same place where 12 years previously I'd watched London 2012. And in my then job, I had to phone up what we called cultural tastemakers. So people like designer Wayne Hemingway and Peter York and that sort of. So I said, what did you make of the opening ceremony at London 2012? Nobody knew what to make of it because it was such a huge thing. And the ceremony goes on for so long. So it's difficult to sort of get a snap judgment or get a decent snap judgment. So I think that's what I would say about Paris. There was lots of snap judgments. People saying, yeah, oh my God, this is awful. Isn't the weather dreadful? This is offensive to me. That's offensive to you. I think it takes a little while just to sit down and see it in the round and get a proper view of it. What I would say is taking it out of the stadium and putting it on the river, which I think was an inspired move. Maybe less inspired if you're on one of those boats and it's pouring down with rain. Now, that makes it less of a good event for the people actually watching it in the place, because obviously they only see a very small bit of it. They don't see the whole event as you would do if you were in the stadium. But I think some of it was absolutely brilliant. I'm not one of the world's biggest Celine Dion fans, but that was a real Olympic moment where she was there, hasn't performed in God knows how long because she's been very seriously ill, and sang her heart out at the crescendo of the whole ceremony. I thought that was absolutely fantastic. It goes on for about 3 hours, doesn't it? It can't all be brilliant. It can't please everybody. But I think there are enough really strong moments in it. That horse that was seen to be riding down the river, that was a fantastic image. The hot air balloon at the end was a fantastic image. But even with the dreadful weather, seeing the runners carrying the torch through the streets of Paris, Paris looked pretty good.
Let's go to the ads coming up. HS2 Rail's London fate and Labour's economy strategy. Why not hit follow on this podcast in the meantime and give us a rating? Welcome back. Now, in her first major speech as Chancellor, Rachel Reeves says Labour has identified a £20 billion black hole in government spending as she seeks to pin the blame for future tax rises on Tory profligacy. Reeves is targeting more empty public buildings to sell off and slash government spending on consultants to balance the books, as she accuses the Conservatives of running away from difficult economic decisions and wrecking the nation's finances. So what about those other big pricey projects like the high-speed 2 rail link? We have policy analysis plus the latest on the Conservative leadership race with the Evening Standard's political editor, Nicholas Cecil. Nick, you discussed this vast shortfall on Fridays a Week's A Long Time in Westminster. Could you give us a refresher on what we know and why Labour presenting this as a newly discovered thing?
Rachel Reeves is announcing today that there will have to be billions of pounds of less public spending to deal with what she says is an unexpectedly big crisis in the public finances. Now, this is a slightly tricky area for Labour, the new government, because yes, they can claim it, that they've gone in, they've opened the books, and it's far, far worse than they feared. And no doubt she will be able to identify some specific items. The example they're giving, for example, is that the Tories' failed Rwanda scheme is going to cost £700 million, not the build £400 million. The problem for the government, though, is that many economists, before the July 4th election, were warning loud and clear that the public finances were in an absolute dire state. And certainly the respected Institute for Fiscal Studies accused the main parties of, in their words, was a conspiracy of silence over the tax cuts, lower public spending, or increased debt that would be needed after the election.
What public assets are on the chopping block?
Well, there's some significant announcements were made, including on road projects and rail and in the health sector. So what the government is saying is they're having to grasp the nettle here. And if you're a incoming government, what you tend to do is you deal with the big problems early, because if you do something now, by the time the next election comes, voters will largely have forgotten about it. Not always. There was a famous case of the Liberal Democrats backing a rise in tuition fees, having said they wouldn't do so, and they never recovered from that. But certainly Rachel Reeves is claiming that the black hole in the public finances is far bigger than expected, and therefore these measures are needed. There's one rail project of particular interest to London, which is whether the high-speed rail link will run from Birmingham to Old Oak Common in a West London suburb, or all the way into Euston, i.e. into central London. Now, my understanding is this is part of a wider review into major infrastructure projects. So no decisions have been taken on this so far, but these items are very costly. And Rishi Sunak last autumn, he scrapped the second leg of HS2, and he was looking to more private sector investment to fund that link between Old Oak Common and Euston. Is yet to be seen whether enough money has been raised there from the private sector to complete that line.
But the government's still remaining coy about these feared future tax cuts and where they might hit?
Yes, well, certainly Labour have been very clear here that they're not going to raise VAT, income tax and national insurance. But if you press ministers on whether other tax rises may rise, then the answer you get back are far less certain. So they're certainly leaving the door open to more tax rises in future. But this is some difficult territory for Labour, because even though their pledge in their election manifesto was very specifically on those three main taxes, during the campaign, ministers went a bit further than just what was stated in the manifesto. So voters out there will have got the general impression that taxes probably won't rise under the Keir Starmer first administration. So if they suddenly now bring in significant tax rises, many voters may feel they've been slightly conned before the election. If Labour, the new government, introduce very targeted tax cuts, particularly on the wealthy, possibly inheritance tax or capital gains tax, then the Labour may not get punished for doing so. The problem for Labour on this, though, is also that if you look in London, the South East, a higher proportion of people pay an inheritance tax because, for example, property prices are so high. So to only hit the very wealthy is quite tricky.
And Monday's the first benchmark for nominations in the Tory leadership race. What's the current state of play?
Suella Braverman, she's dropped out. She's claiming she had the necessary 10 backers to get her into the race. Some sceptics are saying, well, you have named them. I suspect that if push came to shove, she could probably have got 10 people to back her, even if it was only for the very first stage of the race. So she got into it. But I think she knew that she wasn't going to get very far, and that therefore she pulled out. So we've got 6 candidates as of shortly before the afternoon deadline for people to throw their names into the hat. So you've got Tom Tugendhat, you've got James Cleverly, Robert Jenrick, Kemi Badenoch, Mel Stride, and Dame Priti Patel. And I think probably the most exciting thing to say about the Tory leadership race is that people aren't really getting very excited about it. I doubt it's getting much cut through into the wider public. The Tories were decimated at the election, around 120 MPs now. They are not a powerful force in Parliament. So, yes, they will have their election. The result will be announced days before the US presidential election. So it will be completely overshadowed by whether it's Trump or Harris in the US. So they're taking their time to get a new leader. So what will happen now is that the MPs, they'll cut the number of contenders down to 4 for their autumn conference. Then these 4 candidates will be able to make speeches, and they'll be grilled at the party conference in Birmingham. So what the Tories really want to do here is they want to make sure they've got the right leader for opposition, because being leader in opposition is very different from being prime minister. You're not running a government. You're having to basically slightly guerrilla warfare where you're having to try and score hits. It's a very tough job.
There's much more on these stories in the Evening Standard newspaper and online at standard.co.uk. And we'll be back on Tuesday at 4 p.m.